Hello and welcome to the Imperial Truth, episode 118. I'm your host, Greg, and it's just me for the intro today. But don't worry, we have got Mr. Justin Hill on the Black Library writer on to talk about his journey in the Heresy. And we're also visited by Caleb from CK Studios to talk a little bit more about the Nova charity auctions, or raffles, should I say, that are going on very soon. But before we jump into all of that stuff, let's chat Element Games. There is, as usual, I know this, some people probably get bored of this and skip it, and that's fair enough, I completely understand that. We have got a lot of stuff coming out from GW all the time. It's constant. We've just had, just before release, we've had the news that we're getting the Enforcers for Necromunda coming out next week, and also we're going to be seeing Warcry released and the next set of gangs as well, or war bands, whatever they are, coming out shortly afterwards, the week following. And there are plenty of options in there for cults and militia. If you want a real chaosy cult list, then I think you can dive into those war bands from Warcry, and there are some really very different stuff than we've seen from GW before. Some real twisted things. You could have a mix of stuff and then throw the odd one of those into a unit, that kind of thing. You can do some conversions, because obviously there are only limited models in those sets, but when you mix them together with other stuff, you can. There is stuff you can do with a little bit of work in that. The Enforcers themselves, I think, would make awesome looking militia, kind of Survivors of the Dark Age, something like that. More of a practiced fighting force, an experienced militia, and it's something that's very tempting. If I had more time and more money, I'd be contemplating that. Also, we've just had the Porphyrins for Adeptus Titanicus. When I'm finished recording here, I'm going to build mine for playing tomorrow night, because I want to try those bad boys out. And at some point I need to actually pick up another Warlord, the alternative weapons for the Warlord, and a few other bits and pieces. There's so much stuff to get, and Element will help you out with that, with a good service and very reasonable prices. So head on over to Element, use the link in the show notes or the advert on the website for theimperialtruth.com, and you will help support the show. It's nice to see that we've actually got some Heresy releases this week. We've got the Mechanicum, what are they called? Mechanicum Knight Morax Talon. So these are the upgraded Armigers that come from GW. So the plastic ones. These are the ones with the resin upgrades, and they are pretty cool, I think. They're you can use them in not as the non-compulsory troops choice in a Questoris Knight Crusade detachment, and have their household rank special rule, but are limited to a Scion Amatar, and they also can be taken as a heavy support choice in any Mechanicum detachment, which is pretty cool as well. But they lose the household rank rule if they do that, which is pretty understandable, to be fair. The fact they're non-compulsory troops, I suppose that's fair enough. They can provide what I like about these guys is it provides that middle ground. So if you do want to bring a knight army, you can bring some of these guys, and they're front armor 12, side armor 12, rear armor 11, which means you don't need the big weapons to damage them. Yes, your basic troopers are still going to struggle. If you've got crack grenades, you can use them. It's tough. I'm not saying it's easy, but there is at least the option for more stuff to hurt them, which is a good thing. And that's the fundamental issue with knight lists, is you can either deal with it or you can't. And this is a problem we have with just the way armor works in this game, and that is what it is. But this allows an option to, I'm not necessarily saying it's better or worse to have them in your army. It doesn't make it the army better, I say, or you don't compromise. I'm not, it'll be interesting to write lists up to see how well they work, but purely by the fact it allows, lower strength guns just to be able to affect them. can make an actual difference in game. And they've still got 4 hull points, which is, not an inconsiderable amount, to be fair, especially when you consider they've also got a 5-up invulnerable save against all shooting attacks. That's not bad at all, and it doesn't work in close combat. But they've also got construct shields, so they've got a number of shields listed in their profile, in this case 2. Each hit scored against them hits the construct shields instead, and that is shooting and close combat whilst they remain active. They have an armour value of 11 and a glancing or penetrating hit, which causes it to collapse. Further hits strike the model instead, and you can't take invulnerable saves against hits sustained by construct shield, and then they can't be brought back. So they're like mini Titan shields, effectively. It's a 2-use shield, which is pretty cool, because more saves is better, isn't it? So that's fine, and I really like them. I think they're pretty cool. They can also boost your... Well, what they allow is if you're within 12 inches of friendly siege automata that's charged, so a siege automata, war construct, ordinatus, or questoris knight, which is the target of a charge move, the Morax, if it's not locked in combat, may make a single shooting attack against the charging unit if it's in range, as if the attack was made during the shooting phase. Immediately after the charge is declared, but before the charging unit is moved. So you get a free full ballistic skill shot. Now, that's, depending on the situation, whether that's going to be good, effective or not, it's a free chance to shoot. So, potentially you're going to get an extra 2 or 3 shots if someone's got a close combat army and they're coming at you. And you were offered a chance to shoot anything, like you had 3 extra shots with a unit in your game, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to target. Well, they're free shots, so unless there's a negative on what they're shooting, then there is no negative, is there? And we look at the guns they've got. They can have rag cleansers in their siege claws, and then we've either got a lightning lock or a Volkite Vegler. I don't know how to pronounce that. Vugler, something like that. So the lightning lock is 36 inches, strength 6, AP 3, heavy 1, rending, shred, and blast 3 inches. Rending's pretty good with that. Not reliable to go through heavy stuff, but still can do it at a pinch. 3-inch blast, that's cool. AP 3, yeah, you're gonna shred Marines with that. That's pretty cool. And then the Volkite is 36 inch range, strength 6, AP 4, heavy 5, deflag rate. So again, weight of shots, you can do a lot of damage, but also in an era where we might see a lot of demons, that's got potential, and also good against Mechanicum as well. I really like these guys. They're 185 base for one, and then plus 155 for each in the unit afterwards, and they operate independently once they're put down, which is cool. So they're deployed within 6 inches of each other. Afterwards, they're not treated as a vehicle squadron. They operate independently and count that for VPs and stuff like that as well. And they can have the lightning lock is 5 points over the top of the Volkite, and you can actually have 2 of the lightning locks. Or 2 of the, you can go for, so you come with a Volkite for free and the Siege Claw, and you can upgrade either to either. So basically you can have 2 Volkites, 2 Siege Claws, 2 lightning locks, or any combination of those. And the Siege Claw is strength times 2, AP2, melee wrecker. So that's all right. It's nothing to be sniffed at. And the weapon skill and ballistic skill 4 as well. I think these are pretty cool. They're not cheap, but that's fair enough. If they start getting too cheap, then it's one of those things. 4 hull points is pretty good. Obviously, you're a little bit protected as well. You're going to have to strip those 2 shields down before you fire anything too big at them, and then bearing in mind if they're in a night list, that means you're not firing at the bigger stuff. If they're in a Mechanicum list, then it might be a bit of a different story. But then you're going to have other things to worry about as well with Mechanicum. If they're firing at these, they're not firing at your siege automata or your monstrous creatures. there's a lot of cool stuff going on in that. So it'd be interesting to see this. I think they look really cool. I think that's probably one of the most important things. I think they look fantastic. I need to get I want to get some of these. I've got no spare money at the moment. I've got a couple of Armigers. I need some Helverins. And I need to play with some of those. I think they look absolutely fantastic. So well done, Forgewell, for smashing that one out. Yeah, but that's it for new Heresy releases, and I'm kind of glad because I've got too much stuff on, too many things I want to buy coming out, not enough money, and it's just the struggle is real, isn't it? It's proper first world problems, but trying to build lists, trying to do stuff. There's always something new you want to put in, try out. There's always something new coming out for whatever game system you do, and other things as well, screaming for your money. And in some ways, I get a bit thankful that there isn't this whole deluge of cool stuff. It's not great, don't get me wrong. I'd prefer more to come out and I'd have to deal with it. But even these guys are really struggling not to put that order in, but have to be strong. And even if I did put it in, they wouldn't get painted for ages anyway. So there is that side of things. But I'm sure plenty of people out there feel that pain as well. What it does mean is I've got a chance to paint other stuff and try and get on with other stuff. I was talking about my Sisters of Silence. I was hoping to take them to the Fall of Kiron event that happened last weekend, but unfortunately, I had 2 weeks to paint a lot of dudes or dudettes, and it just didn't happen. The Cricket World Cup, I'm a big cricket fan, and I thought I'll watch that whilst I do that, and I can keep an eye on it and see the exciting bits as they happen, and we'll go through it. Most finals of things, of sporting events, tend to not live up to the expectation. Unfortunately, we saw, I say unfortunately, fortunately, it was amazing. Was possibly one of the greatest cricket matches of all time in terms of drama and everything else, which meant I did not a single bit of hobby that day. Even in the evening, I was on too much of a high, and then during the week, one thing happened, another thing happened, and all of a sudden I was left with a weekend to try and paint everything, and then something else happened, and it was really hot. And I know other people will say, "Oh, it's hotter in here." We're not used to that heat. Our houses aren't built for it. Our infrastructure is not built for it. We don't have aircon everywhere, so that happened with some other stuff, and I actually just thought to myself on that Saturday, you know what? It's not going to happen. I'm not going to finish it anyway. If I sit there and rush it, I'm going to take stuff that's not painted. I'm going to feel bad for that. And if I do it, and then do I burn myself out on this project where I really want to get them done because they're here, I can work through them. I hate being the person who says, "Sorry, dude, I can't bring my army." Stuff happened, stuff got in the way. I had every intention of finishing it off, but for the best thing for everyone, I felt, was to do that, and contacted the guys and said, "Look, I'm going to bring some Mechanicum with some Custodes allies." The list wasn't any more tough or anything like that. It was a real shame, but the guys down at the Kiron event were absolutely wonderful about that. And as a result, I'm painting Sisters of Silence now, trying to get them, considering taking them to Company of Legends in September, because I should have them all painted up by then. So plenty to be working on, and get some Custodes fitted around them as well, and try and work out a list. The list that I did have written for the Fall of Kiron was going to be, it was going to struggle in certain matchups. I ended up not having those matchups. The second game I really would have struggled to hurt the Land Raider, but cool, whatever. I've got a weakness in the list, that's fine. I'm not there to smash face. It would actually have been better because Thousand Suns, I played Thousand Suns and Demons in over the 3 games, and it could have been pretty harsh there, having, say, 8 grenade launchers and 5 crossbows that can cause thingy tests. So yeah, there's potential for that, but went down. So we'll talk about it actually. Stuff it. It's run by Attrition Gaming. They've run some 40k events in the past, I believe, and starting to run some 30k events, and this was their first. I was talking to Neil Chalice, one of the guys running them. There were other guys there. There were I think 3 guys walking around, one person playing as well who was helping out. So there were lots of people there. It was down near Southampton. Nice venue with plenty of space. There was a bar on site, although it was out of sight. So I didn't really consider going to buy a drink. I don't drink anyway, and I drove. It's a decent drive. I think it was 1 hour and 50 for me or something like that. But the fact the bar was out of sight meant I didn't really think about going and picking up, a Coke there. So maybe they need something, just a reminder, maybe somewhere stuck around. There probably was. Maybe it was just that I was too into what I was doing. But loads of room. Bearing in mind, again, it was a warm day. Felt pretty comfortable in there. Nice, relaxed atmosphere. I think there was a feel that the guys had run 40k events. There were certainly just a couple of little things. When we got to the awards at the end, we had kind of best loyalist and best traitor in terms of how well they did on the table, I believe, and results got put up, and that's not a bad thing per se, but it felt like there were elements of them running a 40k event having been taken over into 30k, and what's weird is I actually don't mind things like Swiss pairing being used at narrative events, because we still have varying levels of skill and army composition. So, over the course of an event, is it a bad thing if the better players played the better players? Probably not. If it doesn't affect your narrative, then no one need know, in a way. But so I've got no problem with that. But whether it's all needed or not, maybe it is. And I'm going to talk in the following weeks about some subjects. I will possibly get into that later. But it didn't detract at all. But it was just noticeable to me, and maybe other people didn't notice it. But the tables look good. Lots of 3D printed terrain, which is allowed them to do lots of cool tables, pretty distinct from each other, which is really good to see. Some of them a variety as well of terrain and types of terrain on tables and line of sight blocking and all that. And I think you can talk about terrain till the cows come home. People will have different opinions on what's good, sometimes based on what army they're playing. But I had no issues. Well, the last game had a huge kind of, it was almost like a walled off, like you'd see in something like Star Wars. There was a walled off kind of area, but you could imagine like traders being in this walled off area, and it was quite a large piece, and there's potential there, I think, for part of the battlefield to become blocked off if you do that. Now, it didn't matter for us. That was the game I played the Demons, and we also played Diagonal Deployment, so we were kind of halfway across it anyway, so it became irrelevant in our game. But there is potential, I think, just for things like that. There were a limited number of openings, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think, again, it's one of those things where sometimes that will make someone will use it effectively, and it can just nullify a game. Sometimes it will actually improve the game. So it's just something, I think, as players as well as organisers, we just need to think about terrain and be aware of it. And sometimes that means trying it out. That means going, I'm not 100% sure if this is right, but let's give it a go. Be interesting to see what the other guys thought of that table. As I say, for our game that I played, it wasn't a problem at all. But there's potential for that to be there. What was nice about this was I saw some people I haven't seen for a while. My first opponent, Chris Alexander, met him first when he came to my first event I run, which was just cool to see. He was playing a Thousand Suns list, which was a bit different, with some Mechanicum, some Apravian with some Castellax, and then the Thousand Suns specific Castellax as well. He had a huge unit of jump pack Marines, 2 Vindicators, which was really interesting because you don't see Vindicators a huge amount. They were squadroned up, and you don't necessarily see that kind of list with Thousand Suns. What did he have? He had rotor cannon heavy weapons teams, which for Thousand Suns can be really good, and some breaches as well to try and hold the line. And then, the Pravian with the 4 Castellax, and he had a couple of apothecaries, and there was a chaplain in with the jump troops as well. Now, Chris is a decent player, understands the game, and he has an opinion on the way Thousand Sons are played. He's not a massive fan of playing Magnus and everything else, and that's cool. I think it's refreshing to come across an army which doesn't do that, and again, that's not to disparage people who want to bring Magnus, because Magnus is cool, but it was a real nice kind of challenge to see. Now, what's weird is, as a Mechanicum player, I don't like seeing things like Vindicators on the table. Other people don't necessarily have a problem with them. My army has a limited amount of abilities to deal with them from long range, but they're quite good abilities. And this game was quite close, actually, and it turned out I killed one of his Vindicators first turn with my I should probably talk about what I had. So I had in my list an Archmagios Prime with Ordinator and the Machinator Array, Photon Thruster, Abeyant, Cyber Familiar. So he's 3 up, 6, toughness 6, 3 up armor, invulnerable, and then he's pushing out 2 Photon Thruster shots, which have got essentially 2d6 armor penetration with Lance, so you're always armor value 12, and then also can do D3 orbital bombardments once per game, which are also armor bane as well. So he's reliably doing damage, and with the Photon Thruster being AP2, that can be really useful. On that, there's 20 tech thralls in there with Carapace Armor, Right Pure Thought, and Revenant Alchemistry. They are generally wounds for the Archmagios Prime. Sometimes they're a sacrificial unit when the enemy gets too close, and they also sit on an objective. 3 units of Thalax, 2 with Photon Thrusters, 1 with multi-melter, and they're all destructors as well, because vehicles can be a problem for this list. I took 1 Castellax with a Dark Fire Cannon and Enhanced Targeting Array. I had 4 Ursarax with 3 Power Fists in there. A Thanatar, Siege Automata, the big plasma. Then I had an allied Custodes force of Eligio Custodes Shield Captain, and at the moment I've been taking the Power Gauntlet, the Shield, Digilasers and Shrike. So he's got 7 attacks on the charge with the Digilasers, strength 10 with the Power Talon and the Power Gauntlet, and I think it's Mastercrafted as well. I forget, to be honest. So many rules on these guys. He's pretty cool. And they get 3 Custodian Guards, 2 Sentinel Guards with 2 Power Gauntlets in that as well, knowing that vehicles can be a problem, and particularly things like Spartans and whatever. And then I had 3 Venatari as well, so the flying dudes, with a couple of Lances in there, because they're pretty powerful, and their shooting's quite useful as well. And this game basically was all about failing leadership tests and Chris's Castellax shooting the hell. Shred is an amazing ability, particularly against Mechanicum, and particularly with rotor cannons. It makes rotor cannons really cool when I think they were re-rolling ones to hit thanks to their discipline, and then they were re-rolling wound rolls as well. It's a lot of dice, and even then you're causing hits, and it's something like that which actually, you're fishing for 6s to hurt Custodes, but there's a lot of shots going in there. You only need a small amount of luck to force a lot of saves, and then the Castellax, they're so tough, and again, their weapons are so good with Shred and everything else that they're a real force to be reckoned with. And his Vindicators meant I had to kind of sit at the back, and we were playing lengthways across the board with the, I can't remember what the objective is called now, but the one where you've got 1 in each deployment zone, you only score for getting your opponents. So my idea was to charge up the board with my Custodes in an attempt to grab that, use the Ursarax to go in and kill a tank or whatever they need to do, and maybe be a threat against something like the not the Castellax per se, because they could do some damage, although they can cause Castellax problems, but to go in and mop up like the breaches at the end maybe, and then to put a lot of shooting down. But Chris played well. He's played Mechanicum before. First turn he blinds my Thanatar because it's really easy to do, and and thus it scatters off and doesn't do any real damage that first turn. Really cool rule. I had 4 blinding weapons in my list, except Chris couldn't fail a test to save his life when it came to those. He rolled 2 for all his blind tests almost. But he was blinding the odd one of my units, which was really sensible. His big unit of assault troops was a real threat, which I had to deal with, as well as these Caslax. I actually kind of let the Caslax with the Praevians stood at the back of the board, and I just let them just do what they needed to do, because I didn't have the amount of high quality shooting to get them. I was trying to focus on that objective. But what he did was he killed 1 Custodes out of a squad, and they ran away, and that was with my shield captain in them. The Venatari, I deep struck them to try and cause problems and be a bit more in his grill and give him target saturation, basically. They lost a dude and ran away, and there was someone else lost a dude and ran away as well. And the last turn of the game, I actually got my Custodes into his Breacher squad on the objective, and he made some good saves, and I didn't even break them. But there was a squad, there were the remnants of the rotor cannon squad as well left there, so I wouldn't have won the game had I destroyed that first unit. But bearing in mind that unit ran up the table, turned around, ran back, and then couldn't move for that turn, you lose 2 turns worth of movement. Would have put him under a lot of pressure. Meant he had to pull resources back that were doing other things. Would have allowed me more shots. Would have been I don't know if I would have won, but it would have been a really interesting game. And effectively, I think this game was 2-0 because I failed to kill his warlord. He was left on 1 wound, hiding out of line of sight. And I tried to drop a mortar shot on him from the Thanatar, which missed. And that was about it. I think he killed more units because I had a lot of units in my squads as well. So, yeah, it was a really good game, really interesting, really nice to play a Thousand Suns list, which was very, very different. I have played a couple before that have been slightly different, but this was, and it's not to say it's narrative or anything else, but it eschewed the must-have takes of a Thousand Suns list. He took stuff that was good still, like the Praevian with the Caslax is really good. The heavy weapon rotor cannon squad is not something people would think of, but is not a bad squad at all, and pumped out a lot of shots, which kind of doesn't always happen with Legion armies like that. So if he comes up against militia or something like that, he's got a squad that can churn through dudes. So it gives him flexibility in that. And again, when you're fighting against Custodes, enough shots you're going to hurt stuff. But it was a really good fun game. The 20-man assault squad with 6 up invulnerable from their discipline, and then the apothecary as well is quite good. But one important thing is characters. Some of your characters can do precision strikes and precision strikes, and I never remember to do it. This was one of the first games I remembered to go, actually, I'm going to shoot my Ordinator at that squad because A, it causes a blind test, and if I blind them, I can afford to push up the table a little bit further because he's only going to be hitting me on 5s, even with rerolls. But I'll be hitting him on 3s. That's a big thing. And also, if I roll a 6 to hit, I can pick out his apothecary, who's only got a 4-up lookout, sir, and I'm shooting with a strength 6 AP2 weapon. So there's half a chance of sniping him out. I think I did that on one of the squads in the end. Something to remember, but it was a really good, fun game. I haven't played Chris ever, I don't think, and it was really good. The second game, I played Lyle, and Lyle was using word bearers with demon allies. It was cool. I haven't got to face the demons yet. He had a bit of a mix. I think he had a Bloodthirster in a unit of Bloodletters and Plague Bearers, and then he had various word bearers. Basically, he had some of the. He had a few Ashen Circle. He had Rapiers, which I'm a bit concerned about, and he had a squad in front of them protecting them. He had a Land Raider and a Dreadnought with the. I think did he have two. I think he had one cannon and one fist. Either way, anyway, we set up and I deployed fairly aggressively. I was, it's cool. That's why I'm going to play the army. The custodies are going to push across the table and do their thing. And then I seized. And so I was set up right on the 12-inch line playing across the table. And this was, we had 5 objectives on the table. And Dominion, that's the one where you score progressively. And on his right flank, my left flank, he had deployed his rapiers not too far back from the 12. They were probably about 7-8 inches onto the table, and then a squad in front of them. And so my first turn, and I'd put, I thought I have to kill those rapiers, and then I can sweep across. So I'd put a squad of Venatari and then the captain with the sword and shield custodies on that flank to deal with them pretty much by themselves. And what happened was, first turn, I've run across the table and the Venatari, jump pack, Crusader for running. The other squad have gone halfway across the table as well. He had one turn to shoot me with various bits and pieces. And then my Venatari charged his rapiers and wiped them out. And the other squad charged his main squad and wiped them out. And his whole left flank was gone before his turn 2. And the pace of those units is great. And I rolled fairly decently for the foot troops, but the Venatari needed like a 3 or 4 inch charge. They are so quick. And when they came out, people were like, why am I going to take them? They're armor value 3, it's not good enough. And yeah, they're gonna die quicker than regular custodies, but the speed means they're this enormous threat which people either have to deal with or you're going to be into stuff pretty darn quickly. And their shooting is pretty good. Their strength 7 with their weapons, and they're as good as custodies on the charge. With the spears, you're still going in at +1 strength AP2 with decent attacks, high weapon skill, high strength. You're going to do a lot of damage, and they did pretty well. On the other side, kind of moved up. I think I mobilised his Land Raider first turn, blinded his Dreadnought. Again, that's such a good ability. Blind is one of my favourite abilities in the game as a Mechanican player. On the other side of things, maybe not. And then sat and waited for his demons to come out, which Julie, a Bloodthirster, and some Bloodletters did. And I put my Ursarak straight into that Bloodletter, quite happy to sacrifice them to a Bloodthirster if I can take it down. And sure enough, he didn't do a huge amount of damage. And I think I left it on 2 wounds on its first turn, which meant it wiped me out in his turn, then I could finish it off easily with shooting. Ursarak's are quite a good unit to protect against that. I think the Bloodthirster's only strength 9 in combat, so they can't instant kill stuff, which is pretty useful. But the Bloodletters themselves, the basic demons, and he, to be fair to Lyle, it was quite good. His Bloodletters had 3-up armor save, things that made them bloodlettery. His Plague Bearers had stuff that make them plaguey, so he had the Nurgle's Rot equivalent to reduce your toughness, which is pretty cool. But just 2 wounds, toughness 5, 5-up, invulnerable. If they're within 6 inches of the portal, they're re-rolling their invulnerable save. That's a lot to get through. And we ended up with this massive bundle in the middle, particularly when his Nurgle dudes came in as well. I can't even remember what was in the middle, but it ended up being a load of custodies trying to fight them all off. And then I charged the Caslax in, I think, at one point as well. Yeah, it's a tough old thing, and they don't break apart very quickly either. The thing that was keeping them alive was Custodies' armor saves mainly. But we ended up having what turned out to be a pretty easy win. I'd got enough points by turn 3 that, bearing in mind the board situation, he wasn't going to be able to score them back. I'd kind of pinned him back a bit. There was the Ashen Circle had got into a fight with Custodies, with the Spear Custodies, who weren't they weren't dying, but they weren't killing him very quickly because he was tanking everything on his Sergeant, which is sensible. So yeah, it was a really unlucky for me to not only to seize, but also to be able to get across to him that quickly. Meant, and to be fair, he wasn't rolling that hot on the dice either. We had a fantastic game. It was almost a little bit sad, but that it wasn't a little bit more competitive in that sense. But that's the way the dice go sometimes, isn't it? You can't really vouch for that. And then my last game was against Alex, and Alex is a guy who used to live up near us, used to come to our gaming club, and he grudged me. There was a couple of people who tried grudging me. I can't remember who the other chap was now, but we'd agreed with Alex first, and I like that. I think grudges, I think players choosing fights is a great thing in a narrative, because someone could abuse it, but I think generally people won't, and it also takes away that if there's an imbalance in the game, it doesn't matter because you've known it going in. So I knew what Alex was bringing, he knew what I was bringing. We didn't really care, we were going to play. So you can't have that false feeling of, his army was this and I can't deal with that. It's irrelevant. You wouldn't have taken the grudge if you didn't want to play it. So I think that's really cool. There was a couple of weird interactions in this game. So the Loyalists in general weren't doing very well. And that last game, the Loyalists were given a boost under the narrative, which was that we would be going first and the enemy can't seize. And generally, that can be an advantage. We were playing the mission where you I can never remember what it's called, but you hold the deployment zones are worth points. So your deployment zone's worth 3, no man's land's worth 5, enemy deployment zone's worth 7. Some people really like going last in that scenario to try and jump on where's weak and score that deployment. So some people think going last isn't necessarily a disadvantage in that scenario. What's really interesting is Alex was playing pure demons, all Crimson Fury demons. He had Carbander, should I say, a Bloodthirster, a couple of the Flying Dudes, a couple of units of 8 Bloodletter equivalents, and a couple of units of cavalry, and then some brutes as well. And what that turn meant was there was no opportunity for me to go last, which meant my whole first turn, all I could do was walk up the table. And that's a big disadvantage against, or can be a big disadvantage against demons. Sometimes it won't be, because board position can matter in some games a lot. But it meant I was going to lose out on a turn of killing him. And so I would have to turn the next 4 or 5 turns. I'd have to do the job of 5 or 6 turns. What doesn't help additionally was I was playing that scenario and he was playing the Crimson Fury scenario, which is every unit destroyed in combat, friend or foe, he scores a victory point for. And we kept a tally. And I think he killed, it was 14 units died in combat, something like that. And so for me to win that fight, I would have to have scored all of the objectives for each of the 3 zones of control, and I think that would have won me the fight or tabled him. So when looking at it that way, now what I tried to do was spread across the table when he came in, and I tried to attack multiple units at the same time, so that if a squad had ever got down to 1 or 2 wounds left, I could attack the other squad and then hopefully win the combat anyway. Things like the Custodies with shields were amazing in this fight. They just absorbed damage all day long. And even the guys with the spears as well against some brutes were doing that. But unless you can get into that magic, you need to leave a unit on 1 to 3 wounds left to win the combat, for them to fail their leadership test and then roll the right result on their perils, and then on that right result need to take D3 damage as well. And to be fair, I think that's 1 to 5 they take that D3 damage, but you still need them to make that D3 damage. I think twice in the game I'd left a model on 1 wound with no one else to fight, so or there were models who couldn't choose to fight elsewhere, so I have to give him a victory point by killing that model. And that's partly my army build. I didn't have the choice, but it's also partly the way they deploy, because they're in you and they're quite quick as well. So you've got no choice but getting into combat. It's an interesting one, and they're tough as well. The brutes are a real struggle, not a struggle, but a real tough nut to crack. Particularly when I think both units, certainly one unit, their first failed perils, they actually got better. They rolled the 6 and got +1 toughness and strength and whatever. And it was like, oh my word, I didn't need that. And then on top of that, he had Carbander. Now, he came in and I'd moved I had a plan. I had my tech thralls here and I can chuck them into the fight with him and he can slaughter them, but they're fearless. So I can potentially hold him in place. And that first turn, I thought, right, I've got 4 blinding weapons here. So I fired at 4 different big units and 3 of them all passed their leadership test, their blind tests, and Carbander failed his blind test. I thought, result, I'm in here. I can now put my 4 Ursarax into him. They were going to go into him anyway because I was hoping to have 1 or 2 left with a bit of luck. But they can go into him and I can try and smash him up. So they've gone into him. He's now hitting on 5s because he goes down to ballistic skill 1, weapon skill ballistic skill 1. I think he killed 1. Maybe not. No, I don't know. He didn't even kill 1 Ursarax. Unfortunately, my return swings on 3 ups to hit with his 4 up re-rolling because he was within range of the deployment portal meant I only did 2 wounds to him. Cool, whatever. I've got another go at this in his turn because he's still going to be blind. At this point, Carbander, at the end of combat, once all pile-in moves have been made, end of combat, he can place his template down, and his template is the Firestorm template, the big 12-inch one. He places it anywhere in base contact with him, and every unit it touches takes an amount of hits equal to the wounds he dealt in combat. So in this case it was 2. And he hit my thralls with it. And they're strength 9, so he did 2 wounds and failed 2 armor saves. Don't feel no pain because of the high strength. And then there's no rules about how those wounds are taken. So, in theory, logically, they're taken as all shooting is, or all wounds are, and they're taken from the closest enemy models. Unfortunately, because of the nature of charging around a wall at Carbander, I only had 1 model in base contact with him. So he killed 2 tech thralls. Also, due to the fact that Carbander gets a plus D3 combat resolution for all friendly units within 6 inches of him, he actually rolled a 3 and won the combat as well. So my leadership 8 stubborn Ursarax, whenever you need them to make it, they never do, they ran away. So all of a sudden at the end of combat, Carbander is free, which can't happen in any other circumstance. It's a real weird quirk of the rules. It's not going to happen very often, but it allowed him to fly off and join another fight, and that was really frustrating. It's cool, it's the rules, whatever. We played it out. Alex was questioning that rule, and I'm like, well, that's the way the rule works. I can't, after we dealt with it, we can't think of many instances where it would happen like that again, because you could pile in and that template, he only deals as many wounds as he did. Now, fair play, he gets up to 11 or 12 attacks. I think it's 11 attacks maximum, because he gets an extra D3 plus 1 if he's outnumbered. So he can do a lot of damage. But yeah, it was a real weird quirk, and it allowed him to fly off elsewhere, pin a unit. It was actually really good for Alex in the end. But actually, my army, the Custodes units, so the shield captain with the 4 guys with shields, were in combat with a unit of brutes, a unit of lesser demons. Angrath came in, and they also had the Shrike in that combat as well. And they saw off. The combat actually broke off in the end with Angrath because of the way it happened. And Angrath flew off somewhere else away from them. But they killed all the brutes, all the demons, and the Shrike eventually. The 3 sword, spear-armed guys killed. In fact, they were the Venatari killed some brutes as well, because I rolled quite well on armor saves over there. And I wasn't in danger of losing any board position. There was half a chance that I could wipe them off the table by the end of the game, but realistically wasn't going to happen. Needed some big shots from strength 8 weapons to do to actually kill stuff off, but realistically with a 5-up invulnerable wasn't going to happen. But in the end I piled everything into Angrath and took the last wound off him in the last turn with my Venatari because they were awesome. But yeah, at the end of the game, after all that, I lost 13-2 or something because I killed his Warlord and had more units left on the table, I think it was. And yeah, he killed 12 or 13 models and my Warlord. I think it's really hard, but we haven't played a huge amount of the game. An army like his is really difficult to deal with because he's going to be throwing everything into combat with you, and I'm making a Crimson Fury army as well, and the whole idea of that whole army is to be in combat with you, at which point the enemy doesn't want to kill you because he's given up victory points for doing so, and some missions don't have a huge amount of victory points available. If it was Dominion, something like that, there's potential to make that points difference up, but if you're fighting over the objectives, then that's not easy either. You need to be able to, luckily my army can move quite fast, so I was able to sort of dictate where we would be fighting. If you can't do that, or if the objectives in place in such a way that it doesn't really matter, it takes a number of turns to go through these units unless you can pile out a lot of high strength attacks. And most units that do that can't take a lot back. Things like the big assault squads with the extra rules, they're still armor 3, so coming back at you can be quite tricky. It's an interesting one. I don't necessarily think, again, that they're all great. That there's an interesting dynamic between playing their own missions and playing that one. And I think Crimson Fury is one of the biggest issues with that, potentially. I think it's something we're going to have to look at moving forwards, because it's frustrating. It could be frustrating. It didn't bother me at the end of the day. Alex and I had a great game. I got to tease him because he was hiding Khorne units in a way that you should never do as a Khorne player, and we got to roll dice, and I got to kill Angrath and got to laugh at Angrath when he was weapon skill 1 for a whole turn, that kind of thing. It was fantastic, but there could be those frustrating moments where you're literally not playing the same game as your opponent, and it's cool if it's balanced. Whether it's truly balanced or not, and also it doesn't scale as well either. The more units you have on the table, the more chances you have of winning the game, because the opponent can't score more victory points. Because usually, in most scenarios, the victory points are set. So, again, it becomes that much more tricky to play that game. So, it's one to keep an eye on, I think. But I really enjoyed playing my army. I really enjoy using the custodians. There's a lot of rules I'm trying to remember. I want to get the full Talons list up. It's going to have weaknesses. Luckily at Company of Legends you can write 2 lists, so I might take some Mechanicum as allies for them for if I do come up against someone who's mainly bought tanks. I've got a secondary option to be able to give them a fair game. But yeah, I want to get the sisters on the table. But the event was really good. The Fall of Kiron, the attrition wargaming, as I said, I think they call that attrition games. They've already put their tickets up for their next event and actually sold out straight away. There is some talk of them doing a doubles next year. You can go and find them. Oh, they put an event up. They've got, in fact, Attrition Gaming have got a Facebook page. So I'll link to that. And they do their events via that. They say the next one's already loaded up, and they've put up an announcement for Decimation, or Horus Heresy doubles tournament coming soon. So whether that is a tournament or whether that's what it is, I'm not 100% sure. But it could be quite cool. In fact, I think they're going for a tournament. They're going all out, which is fun. Again, I have no problems with a tournament, just as long as you're upfront about it and people come prepared. I think for a tournament you have to be very aware that some things in the game aren't that balanced. So we'll have a see how well that comes off. But yeah, absolutely fantastic, and I'd be more than happy to go down there again. But I've been warbling on. I hope you guys like that. I feel a bit funny doing game kind of details and stuff. I try not to get it too deep into the ins and outs, but the broader picture of those games. If you feel that I could have done it better, I could have mixed it up a little bit more, then feel free to let us know. If there were things about it you liked, let me know that as well, because maybe we can do a bit more. We've got some events coming up as well, so hopefully be playing a few games, which will be cool. But we're going to let it go, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Justin. And I'd finally like to welcome to the show Dr. Justin. Yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought I'd get that in for you.
Yeah, I've just graduated, for those who don't know me so well.
I should say,
I was down in London, putting on my silly uniform of a Tudor hat and gown.
I've realised I probably didn't say your second name. So Justin Hill, Black Library author, and now Doctor. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
A lot of hard work.
And 30k gamer.
And 30, yeah,
Clearly the most important of all those.
You wouldn't be here. And attender of my events, which makes you
absolutely.
That's the key. That's the key thing. So, this is another one of those kind of grabbing a gamer on and talking about their journey. I think there's lots of interesting people out there playing 30k who don't necessarily have a voice or want to have a voice, particularly. But it's good to look around. It is very easy in any kind of environment like we have to have personalities that come up and sort of dominate by dint of being personalities. And this, I think, is quite a nice way. And I met you at the London GT, the first one I was involved with. I saw your name down. I was like, is that the Justin Hill? Because I know
there could be only one.
There could be only one. I know that you had been in contact with Carl Tuttle from the Independent Characters at various points. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. So let's go back to the beginning, shall we? When did you first get involved with Games Workshop or the hobby outside of Games Workshop, whoever?
Yeah, I mean, I was involved with Games Workshop before there was Warhammer. So
you're old.
I'm that old, unfortunately. My first White Dwarf was number 32, which was...
Blimey.
I bought because it had an article about using Rings of Power in Dungeons and Dragons, and being a Tolkien nut and a D&D gamer, I had to kind of buy that one. So I grew up with the whole the kind of evolution of Games Workshop from a company that imported American role-playing games to then was making their own figures, and then I remember there was an article in White Dwarf saying, because until then you bought your figures to represent your character in Dungeons and Dragons and things, or to be a monster to slay. And they said, well, why not put all your figures together in a regiment? And they had a kind of regiment of wildly different looking figures that just looked so cool. And it really reminded me of kind of Robert E. Howard and the Conan stories.
Sure.
Because Conan always seems to be in a mercenary regiment. And I thought, that is brilliant. So I kind of grew up with Games Workshop from the beginning.
Roughly how old were you about that time then?
So I was born in 1971. So
you didn't have to tell me how old you are now. It's fine.
Yeah, getting old. And so I think I was 16 when 40k actually launched.
Cool.
And I mean, I think for most of 40k, I love the 40k fluff in the world, but as a gamer, and I was a gamer long before I was a Black Library author. As a gamer, kind of the serious game was Warhammer Fantasy. And I used to always think of Warhammer 40k as kind of Warhammer Light. You could, everything can move more easily, and everything was, pre-measure and everything. So yeah, always been a Games Workshop hobby, and pretty much always playing as well. I think everyone at some point has a break, and mine was in my 20s. I went to work abroad as a volunteer with voluntary service overseas. But what kept me in the hobby, I still would kind of buy Games Workshop, White Dwarf when I was in the country, but painting. I was a very keen painter, so I would take kind of 30 figures away with me to Africa and sit by gas lamp, with my paints, desperately trying to stop them drying out because it was very dry and hot there, painting my figures. And then I came back to England when I was about 29, having had a couple of novels published. And then I was chatting with a friend, and we discovered that we both had played Warhammer. And so we kind of dug out all our old figures from our mum's attics and then started playing again. And then I've been playing ever since, which is great because I found actually traveling, it's a great way of immediately getting into a community.
Sure.
I was in New York for a while, and I played with the Warmongers, who play at the Complete Strategist in New York, and then in Hong Kong as well. Yeah,
and I've had this with any kind of group that you're involved with on that has a shared interest can do that, and the hobby is now it's worldwide. There's it's everywhere, and it's that connecting thing. It's like getting a football out in wherever you are. Like everyone's football, yeah, we know football, cool. We can all understand the language of football. You can do that as soon as you get out a Space Marine in a gaming centre. Some people are going to be like, cool, Space Marine, let's have a look at what you've done.
It's true. And it's amazing how many people kind of come out of the woodwork.
Yes.
It's a great hobby. And, it's changed so much now with the internet. And it used to be kind of a few of me and a friend at school, and there was not very many of us. And so we never really met any other people. And the internet and podcasts, it's just great that the community has kind of come together and coalesced from around the world into really kind of vibrant groups.
Yeah, and I think also the growth of geek culture, for want of a better term, being pushed into the mainstream. Dungeons and Dragons board gaming is becoming seen as normalised.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to presume at all, Greg, but you were a similar age to me, and the amount of I got for being a geek when I was a kid, and now it's so cool. My kids won't understand, so we're very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but and I'm one of those stubborn people who's like, I like it. But if you're not, that can really grind on people, and there's I might have talked about on the show, but there's a show called Critical Role, which is a Dungeons and Dragons playthrough, and it's massive. And if you just go and try it out, it's brilliant. It's 7 or 8 voice actors who are doing it, and I think it's fantastic. And there's this kind of post to them, and one of those guys on there was talking and was like, well, all these people creating things like Stranger Things now and whatever it is in our culture that is to do with gaming, they were playing Dungeons and Dragons in the 70s and 80s because they were creative people. And then their creative path has continued, and now they're at an age where they're writing the creative stuff, but with this background. And that's not everyone, but that is a portion of what's happened. And all of a sudden, and obviously the Lord of the Rings films helped, massively. All of a sudden,
Game of Thrones.
Yeah. All of a sudden, it's cool to be into swords and sorcery. And you're right. In the early 90s, you were that kid. Oh, look at you with your sword. All that kind of stuff. And now it is normalised because the jock on the sports team will be talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool.
It is cool, and that, I think that's a big part, particularly in the growth and everything as well. And we're hitting this point where people are more inclined. I always used to be at football. I'm not around next week. I'm at a Warhammer tournament. Oh, I used to play that, and now it's more like, oh yeah, cool. I used to be into that. Let's have a look at and it's it's easy, and you're right. It's truly amazing when you're open with it, and not everyone can be with different personality types. I'm very open. I spend too much time in these worlds to hide it. I'm like, I'd be denying part of myself if I did that.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky at school. I was in the rugby team, so I could play Dungeons and Dragons and not get beaten up. But still, the amount of ribbing we used to get. So it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Absolutely. And with the Eisenhorn TV series, if that comes off, that's going to be very interesting to see how that probably pull that off.
Okay, so that's not Heresy.
True.
But no, that's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. Because I think it's another part of our culture, and as geeks, and of the Games Workshop niche that we're in, because it is still a niche. What was your reaction to that news?
Excited. Excited. I'm just kind of brilliant because everyone's been saying, why don't Games Workshop have a TV series? A little. When I actually kind of stopped back and thought about it, though, I did think, okay, the usual reaction is it's not as good as the book. So
as an author speaking,
my fear is it's not going to be as good as the book. But just brilliant that I think it's Games Workshop. And again, of all those companies from the 80s, like TSR and Chaosium. Chaosium's still going, but it's died a few times. Yeah. The fact Games Workshop have kind of surfed the wave this long, and really kind of the hobby has never been in a healthier place. And I used to kind of worry about Games Workshop because having I used to play RuneQuest as well as a role-playing game, and Chaosium kind of stopped supporting RuneQuest, and so my favorite role-playing game died, and so I knew what it was like to have your game company die and to no longer be able to play the game. And so I was always kind of worried for Games Workshop, and I always wanted it to do well because this whole community relies on Games Workshop kind of pumping stuff out and new figures and new rules and new variations of the game. So it's just brilliant that Games Workshop seems to have reached a point where it's a really solid business with a lot of different kind of parts of the business, from computer games to now television, Black Library, Forge World, Age of Sigmar, all this stuff, and it's feeding a really vibrant company, which is brilliant because it keeps our community alive and keeps it going and building and growing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah.
I must admit, part of me, and it's a stronger part of me than maybe. So I've watched out of all the shows that company made. I've watched Man in the High Castle season 1. I haven't read the book. But I thought the season 1 of the TV show anyway was very, very good, and because of that, I have faith that Eisenhorn will be of a level. Part of me was like, why did you do the books? Yeah. Why didn't you do the story in between the books?
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see. And there's other issues that can come from all that as well. Some of our community is less welcoming to interpretations of a piece of work, shall we say?
It's true.
I've got a feeling it could anger certain aspects of the community, but
I think anger is just part of the community. It's,
absolutely. I also think the best thing it could do is anger some parts of the community, because it probably means it will have more of a widespread appeal. Yeah,
and it has to anger them. It's like there's always drunks in a pub.
Yeah.
And there's always angry people in the gaming community. So yeah, no, I'm excited. I barely watch television though, to be honest. So I will certainly watch that, but I don't really know the shows that they've done.
Sure.
So it's good. It's good to know that they're a good production company.
Yeah, excellent. So, pulling that back a little bit to Heresy, were you? I assume you've always been an avid reader, as an author. Most authors tend to be. Were you on the Heresy from the start? All those bits of information.
I was straight onto the Heresy. I mean, in terms of the Bill King stuff, I'm for a Black Label author, I'm probably fairly hazy on my lore, just because having grown up with Games Workshop, they've changed the lore so many times. It's kind of a bit of a blur in my head. but certainly when the Heresy series started, I was straight into it. So I've been into the kind of 30k scene from the beginning, and just kind of blown away, really. And I think, Games Workshop Library Supplies as well. When Prospero Burns and I forget what the other one's called now. Reached number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
Just fantastic, and there were great stories as well. And what a kind of great pair of books. And just reading, Dan's first one with the first line. I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor, and I was like, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, one day I'm going to print that off, the actual first line, the whole of it, rather than the paraphrase version. Because it's just one of those things become folklore. It's and everyone paraphrases it.
I probably paraphrased it.
Yeah, sure. You did. Yeah, which is fine because it's but you get the essence of what I think. It's like I was there. He would later say or whatever. It's just something silly like that. But part of me is like you catch a lot of people out on a quiz with that question.
Yeah, it was just brilliantly ballsy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and of all the Black Library authors who were dealing with kind of the 40k, Dan was the first one I thought who kind of took the. Well, I think what's really exciting with fiction from Black Library, and this is true across all their worlds, is taking the reader away from the battlefield. Because, the way we experience the hobby is through the battlefield. We're pushing our armies around and, we're blowing things up. So to take it away from that and to bring in remembrances and things, and just completely bringing something new to the whole kind of 30k lore. That's what I think is really exciting about a reader, or as a reader, when you're coming across the world.
Yeah. It adds that wealth to the what's going on then when you do get to the fighting.
Yeah, and you see kind of what leads to the battles. Obviously, as a gamer, you're kind of playing the fighting the battle. So you see the kind of behind the scenes and the people who are making decisions, and the kind of the great fleets who are pushing out into kind of unknown space. So I love all that, which is great. I think I've read almost all the. How many books are we on now? 52.
There's 54 plus 54. Before the series, before the Siege of Terror.
Yeah. So I've read almost all of them, and the ones I couldn't quite bring myself to read, I got audiobooks of.
Sure.
To listen to.
Yeah. If you can hear some noises in the background, a fly has decided to come in and is being pursued by one of the cats. I'm surprised.
Yeah, is that Magnus?
No, it's not actually. He's probably fast asleep somewhere, dreaming of ways to ruin an Imperium. But so I agree with you. There's that for me, that the Heresy is only, even as a story, even outside of the books, it's only, its value is increased by the more we know around it of the whys, the who they're fighting for, and all that jazz that comes in.
And I like the way they've tackled it. I was a little nervous when they were going to do the Horus Heresy, because sometimes, as you know, some of the great things about the whole universe are the kind of the unanswered questions, missing Primarchs and things. And I was fearful that they would try and kind of answer those questions, because I think the not knowing is much more powerful.
Yeah.
The half-seen image is much more inspiring as to imagination.
Yeah, I think there are readers out there who feel that has happened. For them, everyone's going to have a different line that in the sand, aren't they? And for me, that point is the Unification Wars. A lot of people want to see the Unification Wars being written about, and I really don't. I think that is. I don't mind the odd story set in the Unification Wars, but to see a series on it, I think, for me personally, would reduce a lot of that element. Obviously, someone might come along and write one and surprise me, but that's my
Didn't Dan Abnett say he really wanted to write about the Unification Wars?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea.
I think there are certain things that would be hard to do. Like all of a sudden you can talk about Second and 11 Legion, things like that. But I think it could be written about.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to see a numbered series in it, kind of thing. But, there might be some way of doing it which is completely different from all that, and that's why I'm not a writer.
But I think they've done a really kind of respectful job. The writers are all fans of the lore, so I think they've done a great job of taking what's there, expanding it, adding it, making kind of a coherent sense of it, but also kind of respecting the kind of historical narrative aspect of it. So, novels are not history books, and they're told from characters' points of view who may or may not be correct or right or have a kind of correct understanding of what's going on. And I think that there's lots of those nuances are still within the lore, which is great.
Yeah, and in fact, so one of the books you've written, Viking Fire, is. Or do you want to just quickly surmise the story of Viking Fire?
Yes, in the real world, I'm a historical novelist, so I'm working on a series about the Battle of Hastings. And the 50 years before that. So the first one is Shield Wall, which is about Godwin, who's Harold Godwinson's father. The second one is Viking Fire, which is about Harold Hardrada, who's the last Viking and perhaps the greatest Viking. And it's his kind of autobiography as recounted to an English priest in the week before the week between the battles of Fulford Gate and the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where he gets killed.
Yeah. And I read it or listened to it. I listened to it, and I messaged you straight after. I was like, what's this story based on? Like, where is the information come from? And you're like, well, mainly here. And it's like, because if this bloke did half this stuff, then he's one super badass guy.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was a badass guy.
And within that, you have this history, which is potentially a myth, which who knows? Like the true story. Obviously, there are certain things that you will know because they'll echo through other things and that. That only adds to him as a figure. Yeah,
and certainly, I mean, I was thinking about that kind of historical nature of it. So, as far as we know, everything in the book is true, that, all the kind of big events.
Yeah.
But it's also told through his point of view, and he's a badass guy with a sort of serious attitude problem. So he kind of skews his own history a bit.
Yeah.
Which again is interesting.
Yeah, and I like that about, I'm with you. I think they've done very well. And again, there are certain people, there's some maybe personality types that don't engage with that quite so much. They would prefer a cleaner story. You've got that double difficulty with the Heresy, where you've got that contradicting lore already, and then you've got different viewpoints, and that works quite well to shore up a contradicting lore, but leaves people who want to know what happened maybe a little bit fuzzy around those edges. But that means we can have, we can be sat in a pub in London like we were at the LGT on a Saturday night, talking for hours about, did X really happen, or what was meant by Y.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think ADB has done a great job with the Talon of Horus of kind of taking that story again and sort of looking at it from, I'm not sure exactly when his stories are set, but not long after the Horus Heresy. And again, kind of giving us really good insights to what happened in that period. Yeah,
definitely. And if you, and only confusing things more if you're after that kind of clean.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's got their own opinion. They've got their own viewpoint of why they were involved or what they were doing.
And I think that's more important when there's the game involved as well, because you don't want to know, actually, your bloke just cowered. Right, this story was right, and he ran away from that guy. And it's like, but that's the bloke I love playing on the tabletop. I want to believe the story where he's this super dude warrior who just got really unlucky because of, he was stabbed in the back by his best mate. You want to believe that on the table. You don't very often. You won't. Some gamers will do it, but not very often. You'll go, I'm going to play this guy. I really hate the character.
Yeah.
People, I've seen people like, I've got Erebus the model, but I'm never going to use him as Erebus because I can't stand him. You get people doing that on the tabletop, or the other way. Right, this guy is awesome. I mean, he's rubbish in the game. Right, don't worry about him one bit, but he's just so cool. I have to take him. and that all adds into people's perceptions as well, which is pretty cool. So when the game system came out, were you straight on it?
Yeah, straight on it. I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and when I'd arrived in Hong Kong, there was very much kind of us and them, the expats and the local people, and I really wanted to kind of break that down. And so I set up a gaming group called the Veteran Company, and we would run narrative campaigns over the weekend, which was completely new to a lot of the local gamers who were very kind of mathematical in the way they played the game.
Sure.
And so we had a really kind of great community of, we had 2 GTs a year. You'd have a kind of the fantasy one in March, and then everyone would switch to 40k, and the 40k one would be kind of 6 months later. And then, you have sort of seasons what you were playing. And so as soon as the black books came out, a friend and I kind of got them and started painting up armies. And because the first one's Istvan, I think I just read Betrayer at the time. And I picked World Eaters primarily because I thought they were kind of cool. I didn't really like Emperor's Children, and being a painter, I liked white and blue. I thought white and blue was quite a nice challenge.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best color scheme in the Heresy.
It is so cool, yeah. And you can splash them with red, so you got nice kind of contrast there. So, my first time was World Eaters, and we went through all the campaign system, played all the games.
Awesome.
And because he was a much more kind of competitive gamer than me, we ended up, I think we alternated, so that one week I'd be playing Loyalist World Eaters, the next week I'd be playing Heretical World Eaters. So the actual kind of the victories didn't matter.
Sure.
And he was Emperor's Children as well. So it was very cool, really kind of different playing styles.
Yeah.
And that was just great. I mean, I have really fond memories of that. That was kind of my last couple of years in Hong Kong. And then I'm trying to think if I started. Oh yeah, I started switching then. I had a kind of crazy job which paid a lot of money, so I was, balls deep into Heresy. I started 4 legions. I had a Raven Guard force, a Salamander's force, my Loyalist World Eaters, and I started an Imperial Fist army, which is my main army now. Again, because I like painting yellow. There's something kind of strange about me. I quite enjoy that.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite interesting. Have you still got all those 4 armies?
I do, yeah. I don't. I sold 1 army ever. I had a Bronze Age Vampire Count's army from Fantasy, and I sold it to a guy thinking, kind of like giving him your pet cat. He'd look after it, and he sold it for about 3 times as much about a month later on eBay. So I never sell armies. So I've still got them, and I have 4 kids and 2 dogs, and I don't get enough painting time, but I want to go back and finish them, because what I found is the Heresy rules have done a great job of making armies fight. Considering they're all Space Marines, that each one fights in the way that you expect.
Yes.
The Salamanders I really enjoy playing because they're so tough, and then the Raven Guard as well. A great couple of games. I've only played them a few times, but they play so differently to other armies. I'm definitely going to get them painted up. And Raven Guard shouldn't be that difficult, spraying black, do some chipping.
Send letters of complaint to Justin at because you bought your Imperial Fists to London, and bought a Marauder Destroyer.
I did,
The Destroyer,
I had the thing about the Destroyer. The Destroyer is basically the Lancaster bomber with the rear gunner.
It's amazing.
The rear gunner was the thing that did it for me.
Yeah, same here.
The Marauder is the much better variant, I think.
It doesn't look as cool.
So I took the Destroyer to London Heresy, and it was completely useless. So I've never played it since, actually.
Everyone has that model that they've always wanted to own, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've always been all right with Titans. I've never been bothered with them. And Thunderhawks never appealed. But for donkey's years, even back when I worked for the company, which was Lord of the Rings period, like third film, the Marauders were just like, I'm going to get one of them one day. I probably never will, but it's just such a glorious beast.
Yeah, no.
And it's
flyers,
so rare.
All the flyers just completely mesmerised me. I started modelling with Airfix Spitfires and Lancaster bombers. So as soon as kind of the Thunderbolt came out, I've got the Thunderbolt, I've got the very early Lightning, any aircraft, just, I get all giggly and excited. Yeah.
I'm sure there are people listening who feel the same about aircraft. It seems to be one of those things that's fairly universal.
Because you can make whooshing noises.
Yeah, dakka, and all that. Yeah, is it a twin assault cannon on the rear of that Marauder?
Twin assault cannon.
Yeah, so
cool. 8
8
missile mounting points, so you could seriously hose someone down.
And the thing is, it looks so imposing on the tabletop as well. And then you explain its rules, and then people still don't believe it until you actually do something with it and go, "Oh, is that it?" And you're like, "Yeah, I've spent my load. It's fine."
Yeah.
But that's part of the fun of the hobby, isn't it? It's getting those rules out. And I know competitive events don't necessarily have to be competitive for everyone, but narrative does loosen those kind of those chains a little bit, and something like that feels much more easy to take in a narrative event.
Yeah, it's. That's what's so fun about the kind of the Heresy scene. I don't get to as many events as I like to, but the ones where people are really celebrating well-designed, kind of interesting themed armies, nicely painted armies. I mean, so that London Heresy where we kind of the 40k guys were displaying their armies and we were displaying our armies. I mean, the sort of standard of 30k painting was just fantastic. It was just great to see, across the board. There was barely a badly painted army, which was great because, you just have so much fun.
Yeah.
You have more fun when there's good, well-painted armies on the table.
Yeah, and everyone, and that event particularly, I think, was a real victim of it being a 40k GT that was very competitive focused.
Yeah.
There were literally 3 or 4 really well painted 40k armies, and was it someone you knew on there?
Yeah, I think some of the guys from Hong Kong had come over for it. Yeah,
and that army was fantastic. But beyond that, there were some good armies, and then there was a lot that were obviously painted to get them used in competition. Which, fair play. That's what that event set out for, that 40k, and people played to it. And then on the Heresy side of things, we had your army was fantastic. Matt Woodsmith's army was absolutely blinding, as well as I can't remember even the names. There's so many people there. The Salamanders of Will Henry, and plenty of others. And it was at lunch on the second day. I think it was the second day, where there were 2 mastodons on the same table, one against the other.
Yeah,
and everyone had to walk past that table to get out. And it was like the hottest woman in the world had walked in, because everyone's heads turned to these mastodons as they walked past them. Because a lot of the 40k players, they were never going to take one in 40k because they're not good enough or whatever. So they don't look at it. Which again is fair enough. If you're playing competitive gaming, why would you look at it if it's not good enough?
And it's amazing actually with the Heresy how you can take enormous armies and ridiculously big things like mastodons, and the game still works. It still flows. People are dying left, right, and centre, but it's a really fun game. And that certainly wasn't the truth for something like Apocalypse when it first came out. We always kind of get ground down into kind of long, tedious games. So Heresy is great, and so you can take these big things, and they all work together. Yeah, and
I've said on here plenty of times. I've now the Age of Darkness rules are still based on 7th edition rules. Well, 6th edition / 5th edition rules, and I feel there's a lot in there that can now be improved. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but to give the guys credit from the first team working on the armies, the outlay of how the legions work, Alan and all the other people involved, you're right, they feel like different armies. They feel like they work how they would if you were reading a book about them.
Yeah.
And the game, you're right, the game flows. For a system which can be clunky, the game does flow. And yeah, if you put the big thing down, there are some things which are great and kind of dominate, but not a huge amount does.
So what would you, what are kind of, a couple of things you would change?
I very publicly, I think super heavy vehicles need to degrade in some form. Because sometimes, I play a game and maybe I haven't bought the tools to deal with
the
one.
glaive.
Yeah, everyone's got the glaive as an issue.
Bloody glaive.
But even then, just the fact that like a Typhon can have one hull point left and can still be working at full effectiveness.
Yeah.
Which, yes, you can do that to a tank, to a normal tank. But if you've hit it and taken a hull point off, you've either slowed its shooting down for a turn or destroyed a gun or immobilised it. Very, very few times do you glance a vehicle to death. I find it does happen. Don't get me wrong, but the super heavy gets pounded with the biggest gun you've got, and it works exactly the same. And I find that frustrating. I find a wound allocation frustrating. I like the fact that positioning matters. What I hate is the fact that one guy can stand in front of all the bolt gun shots and catch them all, and then as soon as the las cannon gets shot at him, he steps out the way. That feels wrong. How you fix it within that system, that's a different question. Don't get me wrong, and this is why I'm not demanding change or anything like that. I think in a future version, I would like to see these things approached and from the ground up, however they want to do it. And I think there are rules from 40k new edition that don't necessarily port straight over, but can influence a 30k gaming system.
So they bring out some of the, I haven't played the new edition,
sure.
But it seems that there's some quite good rules that you could bring over that would make sense and make it an even more fun game. Yeah,
and and there's a lot to choose from, and I don't think the game needs to change drastically. I think a few small changes would help. And there's little things. And when you're in a game which is designed narratively, and I think it was unapologetic from Alan and indeed from Laurie in talking to people around it, was like, it's a narrative game. Like, if that's a problem, don't do it. That's cool, but sometimes when you've got an organised meetup, you just need to be a little bit more kind of tight on that, and we can step in as organisers and as community members and develop FAQs to just round off some of those edges.
Because shame doesn't always work well enough, does it?
No, absolutely. Well, some people don't. Well, first off,
thinking of Thousand Suns, and Magnus.
Which is weird because I've only ever lost against Thousand Suns. I think this weekend was the first time I've lost, and there was no Magnus, there were no Terminators.
Okay,
and it was a really different army, and it was great.
And fair enough. I only played against him once, and I think the guy was just so embarrassed he didn't use half his powers. I did end up winning, which was
bless. But even then, for that shaming to work, and it gets talked about a lot in thing, and it's a bit tongue in cheek as well most of the time. For that to work, the person who's being shamed has got to understand that his army does X. And that isn't always the case either. Like, someone looks at their army, I don't know what the problem is. Like, I don't win any games, and it does this. And then you get on the table with them, and I said one of those Thousand Suns players used all his psychic powers wrong. I'm sitting there going, if this was a tournament, kind of, if we were playing Warhammer in an event, I'd be wiping my brow here because I'm going to take you down because you could have ruined me. And cool. They didn't care. They were playing the game they want to play, and they were doing things they want to do. Maybe they like taking big risks or whatever they're doing. But I was like, well, effectiveness wise, you could have played that a lot differently. And I think it's easy to forget that army and player are two separate things. And most of the time, it's the way the player plays the army.
Yeah, it's true.
Again, I'd go all the way back to an event at Warhammer World ages ago. Matt Locatelli had a night army against me, and I was always going to struggle. So he changed his list, because that one you could choose 2 different lists. He took the slightly less offensive list, but if you want to call it that. And we had a cracking game, and I was a few rolls away from really challenging him, and then he rolled me because it didn't come off. But that happens in games, doesn't it? Like, just played the weekend against demons for the first time, and a bit unfortunate in that one of the special rules that was given was loyalists have the first turn no matter what and can't be seized. And I was like, I don't want the first turn though. I want the demons to come down and then I can shoot him. But there were lots of little things like my favourite rule in the game is blind at the moment. I shot the guy bought Carbander, and I shot 4 different units with blinding weapons, and the only one to fail their blind test was Carbander. So I was like, come on then. So I've charged my 4 Ursarax in with 3 power fists, and he's done nothing to me because he's weapon skill 1, and I'm like, brilliant. And I've done 2 wounds to him. And then he gets plus D3 to combat res for every combat within 6 inches of him, basically. And he rolled a 3, 1 combat, and those Ursarax ran away. And you're like, I had a whole nother round where he was weapon skill 1, and after that, he's never going to be weapon skill 1 again.
And you could have changed the whole course of the Heresy.
Absolutely. I could have sent him back from whence he came. And those little things happen in a game, and you can't do anything about it. But it would have changed the course of that game big time. And when you talk about that game, that context is huge, But it was good. It was good fun, I must admit. It was hard work, but it was good fun. So yeah, that's my views on the Heresy moving forwards. And I suspect that's not going to happen for a while for a new rule set.
I think get all the rules out, and then they'll all settle down. Yeah,
and I think that's fair. And they've got time schedules. They've only got so much they can get done in any period of time. And the game's serviceable. The game is a good, fun game still.
That's true.
And I go into it with my eyes wide open. There are aspects of it that I'm not as keen on. Whatever, that's fine. It's, nothing's perfect, so it's really good. So the fists. Going back to you and your stuff. Those 4 armies you've got there. Then is there a connection to those armies as well?
In terms between the armies?
Of you and those armies. Like, I know you say you like them, but is there a little bit more? Or
I was never particularly a Space Marine player. I was much more an Imperial Guardsman. And so the World Eaters I really enjoyed, because ADB made them come alive with Betrayer, and just kind of surprised me. It was so much more rich and interesting than the crazed, blood crazed berserkers that they are in 40k. So I'm trying to think back now to kind of I wasn't that kind of up on the lore of the Space Marine legions, and I'm trying to think why I picked the Imperial Fist. I think again because I liked yellow, and I was I was thinking in a number of reasons. One, I like painting yellow. They seemed they seemed kind of dull and boring. And I guess I kind of like to sort of challenge that idea.
Sure.
And I was kind of future-proofing, because I thought, I want an army that's going to be at Terra. Because when the narrative book comes out, I want an army that's going to be there. But in terms of kind of making them interesting, my Imperial Fist army is very different to most, in that it's a drop assault largely a drop assault Imperial Fist army. So I thought, kind of make them Imperial Fists, but make them a really different Imperial Fists. So they're not kind of a kind of cookie cutter style army.
Do you think that's a little bit of the author coming out of the storytelling?
Yeah, I think so, because the story kind of dictated the army. I mean,
sure.
I'd written a Death Watch novel where I set them on the Eastern Fringe. It's one of the Damocles stories, and I set the Death Watch kind of base in an old Imperial Fists kind of bastion on the very edge of galactic space. And because I sort of all these, this was another reason I thought, because Imperial Fists are kind of on sentry duty across the galaxy, and so I thought actually there's lots of kind of interesting stories of these small secluded forces
Yeah.
And so mine was one of those forces that they've been sent out on kind of garrison duty, and they've got to kind of fight their way back to Terra. And so they're not well equipped, particularly. They don't have any big super heavies. They're a kind of small mobile force, a bit of a raiding force. So the story, as a story, the story kind of excites me. So once I had this idea for the story, then the army flowed quite nicely, and it was great because it's not an Imperial Fists, or not kind of a typical Imperial Fists army, and I don't take the stone gauntlet Rise of War.
Do you have Dawn?
I don't know. I'm not really a kind of a named character kind of person.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have Sigismund either, or Alexis. Now my commander is a guy Tertius the Destroyer, and he's died more times than I can remember. But yeah,
no, good time.
They're cool. I really enjoy them. They've actually changed the course of the Heresy. They've killed Lorgar, so I'm not sure who's going to write that novel. But someone needs to go back and change that. Lorgar is dead.
Give Aaron any leeway, and he will write that novel.
I'll send Aaron an email and see what he can do.
I think he's been told what will happen to him if he ever wrote that. Bless him. So you don't go to a huge amount of events, you say. What is it about those events then that you like? Say, because over London GT you've come to Blood and Glory, and I've seen you at Company of Legends, those three. What is it about those weekends that makes you go back and give up? As you said, you've got 4 kids, you've got a full-time job writing and a second job writing, and done a doctorate and everything else.
Yeah. You know what it is there's a couple of things. One is that I get to play 5 games in a weekend.
Sure.
And that is just brilliant because I don't get away much. My kind of local gaming club is York, and there's not much of a Heresy scene there. I mean, I kind of went down a couple of times when I first arrived, and it wasn't really happening. And so to get 5 games is just brilliant. But actually, I just love tapping back into the community because it's often the same faces. Or even as new people, they're into the same hobby. And I love, I love having a deadline for my army painting as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a really good event. Some of the best ways to get an army painted is just, throw yourself in and say, okay, I've got to finish this army now. But I love kind of seeing the guys. I love kind of picking up the sort of social life because it's a very similar kind of group of people, certainly at those events. And I've been to one of Pete Dunn's events he did up at Nottingham as well, which was fantastic. And so I think kind of the community really, even though I've been to no events this year, which is that true? Yeah, no, that's terrible. So I've got to fix that. I'm going to have a crazy last 6 months. But it feels like I'm still part of the community, certainly because I'm listening to the podcasts, people I know are talking.
Sure.
So that's, these are all great things that kind of keep you involved.
I think there's a little bit of, because we're a niche of that niche as well, means that, and because there isn't a competitive scene for Heresy, although the odd competitiveness, event, single event or what have you, because there isn't a scene for it, you've got an even narrower focus maybe than some other game systems. So I can go to a 40k event and I can look at, player A on top tables. In fact, at Bloody Glory, the first year I ran it up there, I knew a couple of people on the big tables, and I just thought, you know what? I'm going to let you guys do your thing, and I'm going to go and talk to those people I know who are down those end of the tables a little bit more, because there was a different vibe going on. And one was because they wanted to try and win the event. Cool, you've come to a competition, try and win the event. And the other guys were, I've come to have a good laugh with my friends. And without that competitive element in the Heresy, it tends to focus more to that one approach, which I think helps the community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Very suddenly had a bad game. I'm trying to remember having a bad game. And what's great about events as well is you get to, meet different people. chat about your army, kind of just refill that kind of nerd, kind of goblet and drink it deep down. It's just great. And to fight different armies. I mean, I think I was at Blood and Glory last year. You put me up against the Custodians.
Yeah,
and I was so delighted because being a Loyalist player, I wouldn't normally get to play them, but I'd taken my World Eaters that year, and so I could fight them and see how broken they were. And
yes,
they were quite broken.
Yes, old Custodians in a good player's hands were quite a thing.
Yeah,
and Chris, bless him, he's represented England in Age of Sigmar at the Warhammer at the ETC a number of times. So there's a guy who knows how to play a game. Bless him.
Yeah, he hosed me.
He did twice.
I mean, it felt quite good in a way because you expect the Custodians to be rock hard, and in that way they kind of play how they should do. I think they were just underpriced for their abilities.
But hey ho, we survived. We survived the Great Custodians year or whatever it was. Came out the other end. Yeah, and I must agree. Like the great thing about any hobby, particularly some hobbies are more limited in the kind of people who play them, and there are certainly groups that are less common in playing this. But if I go and play football and cricket and whatever, I'm dealing with people from different walks of life. And then when I go and play Warhammer, yes, it's probably dominated by upper working class, slower middle class white people, and men. Yes, that is it. It could be wider. But like you came down that first one, we went out for the night, ate fish and chips and went to the bar and stuff. And there's no way we would ever meet and chat. And
yeah, that's true. That's very true, actually.
We'd go to different places for starters. I was like, oh my word, he's ordering all kinds of wines and things like this, And I'm like, oh, it's a bit posh for me.
The strange gamer who drinks wine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go the other end, and you do mix. Like sometimes when you find out what jobs people do, you're like, really, wow, that's quite crazy. And it doesn't matter. It's not a relevant thing on the way you interact with them, but it's showing that there are these different social groups, and gaming forms its own group outside of those, which I find really cool.
Yeah, no, that's very true. You're entirely the wrong end of the country, much too southern to.
We speak a bit more properly down here. It's fine. And the beautiful thing is as well, like there are some people can feel inferior to other people at times, and that. But when you sit and talk about your gaming or the law or whatever, it kind of doesn't matter that this person's managing however many hundreds of people in their job, and this person's working front of house at a bar or whatever. That's irrelevant when you're both bringing like interesting insight to a conversation or discussing a game and what happened and storytelling. And there's something magical about that, I find.
Yeah, I mean, all these kind of events, what happens in the bar afterwards is almost as much fun as the gaming.
Yeah.
Because there's very easy topics of conversation, and invariably, you're meeting entirely new people and just having an absolute blast all night. Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great scene. Now you're enthusing me again. I have to get I modelled up my entire Salamanders army at Christmas, and got a Mastodon for them as well. So,
oh, nice.
I was supposed to get painted up for the Company of Legends. It's not going to happen, but maybe Blood and Glory.
Cool. That sounds pretty. Okay, let's. We've been chatting quite a while. I'm going to ask you some little bits more about your stuff now. So you're a writer. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And we mentioned a couple of titles. You do historical novels is your thing, and you've got some very good reviews and some awards, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For that, so. Anyone who's interested in historical novels, I've only read Viking Fire. I can thoroughly recommend it, and I refuse to recommend stuff that I wouldn't recommend. I'm not paying lip service to anyone here.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Some people think I would. I refuse to do that. Yeah, Viking Fire was great. I think that's the only thing I've read of yours, so I can't comment too much on the others. But yeah, something worth checking out. I will fire up some Audible credits at some point. When did you first get involved with Black Library?
I first started probably about 10 years ago. I was over in the UK and I went to Games Day. So it was when Games Day was still happening, which was probably quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And I met Mark Gascoigne. He did a kind of a session, and I went up to him and said, "Listen, hi, I'm a writer. I've been part of the hobby since it began. I would love to write some books." And then went on the what was then very typical approach of you get some Warhammer Fantasy stuff to write. So I was writing Golgfag, the Man-Eater, as my Warhammer Fantasy character, who was brilliant. He was a really kind of fun, kind of, if you were thinking D&D terms, he's kind of a chaotic neutral hero. Yeah, he was just kind of great to write as a character. And then they blew up the old world, and I switched into 40k, and I think I did a Death Watch, and then kind of again typical. Here's a Imperial Guard story, and I was writing Asaka E. Creed, the Cadian general.
Yeah.
And then he got trapped in a prism, and his planet got blown up. So now I write Cadians. Well, amongst other things, I guess the Cadians is the main thing. I was writing. It was going to be a kind of a Battle of Tyrock Fields, which is where the 13th Black Crusade kind of kicks off. And I was about a third way through the book, and Nick Himes wrote me an email and said, "How are you doing with that? Because we're going to blow up Cadia. And would you like to write it?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So I felt quite a bit of pressure then, because surprisingly, there's almost nothing written about Cadia, and this is something I really want to change. Kind of retrospectively putting it into 40k lore about Cadia and what it's like to be a Cadian. And the only kind of time it featured in a novel is in Eisenhorn, when Eisenhorn visits the planet. So that's what I'm doing now with Black Library.
Cool. And so there was no pause when it was like Cadia's going to blow up. You weren't like, "Oh, you can't do that." You were just like, "Yeah, no, let me write that."
You can't do that.
Sure. But never to the editor who's telling you to write the book.
Yeah, and they sent me the campaign book.
Right.
And I didn't love it. And I thought someone has to do better than this.
Sure.
If we're going to blow up Cadia, which has been the kind of the poster boy of the Imperial Guard, then it has to be more narratively satisfying. So I did my best within the time limits and everything else, and kind of rewriting crazily. So again, that's kind of still what I'm doing now, is trying to give the Cadians a really kind of cool story post the fall of Cadia.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and the other thing, and by the time this goes out, my first Necromunda novel is coming out, and that is a fun setting.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to be writing in the kind of Games Workshop universe without having to write, huge battles.
Sure.
And without, in a sense, not that the Imperium is good or Chaos is bad, but again, kind of taking chaotic neutral characters and just seeing what they get up to. So I think the first one is coming out in first week of September, so it'll be up kind of pre-order not long after this comes out, and that is called I shouldn't so I'm getting old now.
That's all right.
I can't remember what it's called. I remember it's Terminal Overkill. I should not forget names of my novels. I wrote it a while ago.
Too many books. That's yeah. Blame it on that.
Exactly.
You almost named your final Hastings piece as Terminal Overkill.
Yeah, exactly. I have too many novels and short stories going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Terminal Overkill out first week of September, and super fun to write that. And again, in terms of kind of expanding the world away from the battlefield, what I always love about Dan Abnett's writing, especially with the Eisenhorn and Ravenna novels, is we're seeing worlds where Imperial Guardsmen came from or Space Marines came from. And I think that with Necromunda, that's a kind of a similar vibe. Nothing's about chaos or Imperium. It's all about staying the heck alive in living hell, which is great.
Absolutely. And have you been in a lot of chat with the Specialist Games guys in working with that, or are you giving a little space of a hive to work in?
Yeah, I've it comes all through the Black Library editors.
Sure.
But I've been doing quite a lot of Necromunda work, and I have quite a lot of horror things as well, which are coming out probably next year or later this year. So it's just, I've been having a really fun kind of year so far with Black Library, because my PhD is finally finished, which means I'm writing full time and taking on a lot of new projects. And the horror is great because it's not battlefield focused necessarily. And the Necromunda is great because it's such a cool setting. Exciting times. I'm really enjoying myself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else before we go that we've missed out that's vital to know about Mr. Justin Hill? Dr. Justin Hill.
Dr. Justin Hill. Well, Lorgar is dead.
Do we have to call you Dr. Justin Hill every time we meet you?
Clearly.
Excellent. I will do that.
Yeah. Lorgar is dead.
Okay. Just confirming that, yeah.
Exactly. My Leviathan punched him in the face.
Sorted. I think my knight stepped on him once as well, so definitely dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have to get ADB to write a novel now.
Just need Corfaron to be put in the hole with him, and Erebus, and we'll all be happy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Justin. I will certainly look forward to seeing you at an event at some point soon.
Is Blood and Glory up for sale?
We won't talk about that
yet. Okay.
Soon. It's been soon for a while, but it's definitely going to come. But brilliant. Yeah. Cheers for coming on.
Cheers.
Well, I'd like to welcome back on the show Mr. Caleb Wissenbach. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, I'm good. Busy, but good. And you are as well, off from our little chat before we started recording.
Yeah, busy too. Definitely got a big project that we're just putting the finishing touches to. So I'm kind of banging out everything. It's early. It's earlier for me. I shouldn't say it's early. I know it's late for you, but I'm just getting the day started, trying to get this project finished up so we can get it shipped off to Nova.
Absolutely. So, just for those who don't know, you are one part of CK Studios, which is growing and growing and growing. Almost every time I speak to you, there's more people being added.
And growing and growing.
Exactly. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But first, so this project that has been taking up some of your time, I think we ran through the Nova Charitable Foundation, the raffles that they're doing, but you are involved with the Warlord Titan. Let's get the right one. The Warlord Titan.
We were invited by a company that will remain unnamed, who donated a Warlord Titan over to the Nova Open Charity Foundation. Cool. We were asked if we would paint it. Kat kind of jumped into it. There's a funny story about it. She loves laughing about it and everything, but she kind of jumped into it and said, "Oh yeah. That'd be no problem. We'll do that." And she was thinking it was a Warhound Titan, not the Warlord.
Right.
And she was thinking, we'll bang that out in a week or so, no big deal. And she came up and talked to me, and this was right at the end of LVO. And she came up and told me, she said, "Hey, great news. We're going to do a Warlord Titan. Well, you're going to do a Warlord Titan." And I was like, oh, man. And with our schedule, with the artist that we had just brought on, our schedule was starting to really tighten up for free time.
Sure.
So I was trying to figure out how I was going to do it. I was like, ooh, it's going to be chunky, it's going to be tough. And so we sat down, ended up kind of brainstorming it out and decided, hey, we should do a team project. What better way to introduce the new artists that we have with CK Studios than to have a team project? So we turned it into a team project, thinking that would make it a little easier. With the craziness of our schedules, we have Sam Len, we have Vince Ventrilo, We have Justin Kiefer, and now we've just added Dev Sodagar into the list. All of these guys are full-time in something, whether it's their regular academic job or it's their full-time artists, full-time commissions, full-time Twitch, traveling, all this stuff. It was incredible the amount of logistics it took to get the Warlord done because, it was that hurry up and wait. I went in, and just before Adepticon, I had to get all of the armor plates painted and get those finished up and ready to get sent off so that they could begin the freehand. Well, the problem is just after Adepticon was the soonest I would see all of them. But then just after Adepticon, they started their tours, and they were busy for a couple months. And so, it was hurry up and then wait, because the armor plates would sit for weeks to a month. And then the next artist would get them, and they would work on it. And then their schedule had to match up with the next schedule. And man, yeah, it was fun. It was very interesting. We didn't get to do everything we really wanted to do for the Warlord Titan. We really wanted to do a very narrative display base for it.
Right.
And just with the difficulties of getting some of the armature done and getting the pose right and doing all that stuff, we kind of ended up not hitting the window on the artist that was going to work on the base. So he actually had about 2 weeks to be able to do the base, and we sat down and looked at that, and he wanted to do some resin pouring and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And we looked at it and we went, that's not going to be feasible. And we want to make sure that we maximize the limited time that we had, the availability. So some of the things we didn't get to do. The good news is that the majority of the project came off without a hitch. I think we're running about a week behind the schedule that we had originally kind of set out. So that's not too terrible. But yeah, we're finally getting the final assembly photos. I did all the photography on Thursday and Friday. Got that sent out so that you guys should be able to start seeing the full pictures of the Titan here in the next few days if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, and just to clarify, if you want to go to novaopenfoundation.org/raffle/siege-of-heaven/ then they're all there. I'll put that link in the show notes for this episode as well. But there's a load of pictures up, and you put them up on the Facebook, am I correct?
Yeah, we have some up on Instagram and Facebook under the CK Studios tagline. So so you'll be able to see the photos there, and I mean, it came out incredible. The work that everybody did, from the glowing effects and the weapons that Justin did to the freehand that Sam did and the freehand that Vince did, the color choices, the development of it. The model is just phenomenal looking. It is definitely a work of art. It is a one-of-a-kind Titan. Man, I'm super excited for it. But yeah, it also comes with a KR case. That's what I'm working on today, is cutting the custom foams so that we get the case all built together. But it comes with the KR case. I mean, it's just an incredible value, and somebody's going to win that thing for $8.
Yeah, that's it. It's $8 an entrance, a minimum transaction of $10. So, not a lot if you're going to be the winner. That's a pretty good return on investment, just for the cost of the Warlord alone, let alone the paint job. So the freehand, I'm just flicking through the pictures on the website itself. The white kind of what would you call it? The extra detailing, was that all freehand? The little bits in the edges of the panels. Is it leaves? Is it vines? Yes.
Oh, it's cool. It's like little leaves and vines and swirls and just that kind of filigree shape. That's one thing I'm so excited about with this Titan. And I've seen a lot of big Warlord Titans in the past that have some amazing freehand. And, but what the tendency is because the model is so large, because the panels are so flat, instead of really working the color scheme of the armor, they cover it with freehand, and they do these giant murals and stuff like that, which, I mean, they're gorgeous. They're works of art in themselves, but I've always felt they've always become the focus of the model. where the freehand dominates the model, and it's hard to see the model underneath the freehand. And so one of the goals that we talked about when we were developing the idea, and we were jumping through the ideas of how we would paint this model, was making sure that the freehand, though it stayed elegant and it was nice and detailed, that it would be a little more subdued, a little more simple, so that you see the model more. That the model is more of the presentation, not the freehand of it. And I think Vince and Sam just nailed the spirit of that perfect. I mean, there's some incredible freehand if you look at like the little shields that go right on the edges of the shoulder pads have these skulls and stuff that are so detailed and so tight and so clean, but they're understated. They're very nice and modest, I'd like to call it. So it just enhances the model. It doesn't overtake the model. It was definitely the view that we had. And so I was super excited when those plates showed up at the house and I started to open them up and take a look at everything they did. It was just like, oh man, this thing is just going to be incredible.
Yeah. For those who haven't looked yet, the shoulder plates, the large shoulder plates on the Warlord, are left almost completely free of any extra detail. There's weathering and stuff like that going on, but then as you say, that freehand is kind of centralized. So yeah, there is both. You get the joys of both having this amazing freehand in certain places, but also letting the model speak for itself. And those shoulder pads are one of the main focal points, aren't they? Because they're so big.
Yeah, and the color choice that we did and the saturation of the color. We really wanted to present that color in the model to really give that I don't know, just I don't know the words for it, but just how that color combination comes together and the vibrancy of the color, just it really presents the model, just everything together. I mean, the team killed it. The team just absolutely killed it. Every aspect of the model was done so well. Super excited about it.
How do you decide on the emblems? Because there's a lot of different stuff on here. Some of it's linked. There are skulls because it's 40k, so that's cool. But there's crenellations on. There's a tower on one part of the shoulder pad, and then that's kind of repeated on one of the shields on the underarm, and there's bits and pieces. Was that who was throwing ideas around for that? Was that all of you?
That was all of us. And I mean, it floated through a bunch of different aspects of the model for the creation of that. Of course, Carl Tuttle from Independent Characters wrote the background story for the model. And the idea that it's this Siege of Heaven is the name of the Titan. And then the maniple that it is in very grandiose, I would say almost grandiose Arthurian type imagery to it with the names of the different Titans and stuff like that. And I'm going to save those. They are all in the background story. So if you make it to Nova, you'll get that background story in the booklet. And then maybe after Nova, that'll be up to Carl if he releases that for more of a wider public view. But right now, there's
a tease of it on the Nova page.
Yeah, there's a few teases of it. I mean, Carl wrote a ton of stuff for it. I mean, just his storyline is, his background for it is so fantastic, and it takes it through all the iterations of the Titan and what it was doing during the Heresy, where it was at, why it was fighting the way it was, how the Heresy kind of tore apart the house that the Titan was from. Sure. Because the war definitely affected that, and then so that the original heraldry and stuff that we wanted for it, we wanted to be that kind of grandiose Arthurian type heraldry, and that's where you're seeing the skulls and the towers, the swords, the strength of it. It fits very well into anybody that maybe might have something like an Imperial Fist or a Black Templars or something, with that type of imagery. But then we wanted to mix up and give it a little more of that grimdark, and that's where a lot more of the skulls come into play. And so there's a little shift to it just to keep it kind of more in the 40K idea. And we bounced around so many different ideas for the freehand on this, from being a very sea-based imagery and stuff like that. The greens, the very light greens and stuff like that we chose. The reasoning behind those greens is because of where that Titan was deployed.
Sure.
So you'll see there's a lot of the bone and green were our two, a creamish color, a bone color, and green were our two primary colors. And that was because of the area that Titan was fighting in and why it was fighting in those areas and stuff like that. So it was really fun. Everything definitely has a nice tie-in, and just again, the ability of all these artists. That was the neat thing about having artists of this caliber, is that everybody was able to do their techniques and their strengths and still be able to adjust it. So you won't be able to look at the Titan and go, oh, Justin painted that because that's signature Justin, or I can tell the freehand that Sam did because that's signature Sam, and I can tell the freehand that Vincent did because that's signature Vincent. I have no idea. When I look at the plates, I have no idea who painted what. Right. Those guys got together and over a weekend did all of the freehand and filigree and such, and I can't tell who did what. So I think that's really amazing. And then when you see the armor plates that Justin did, and you hold them up to the armor plates that I did, and while we do have slightly different styles in our painting, they meshed so well together. The only thing that we had one artist do was the trim work, because I do have a unique style to the trim, and I thought that was really accented on this model. So I ended up doing the complete trim work. That's the only parts of the model that just one artist worked on specifically. Other than that, it was such a team effort, and it's really hard to tell where one artist stopped and the other artist started.
So how do you feel about trim after?
I want to say if I have to paint trim anytime soon, it's too soon.
Yeah.
But being glutton for punishment, I'm going to start in on my Black Legion. I really want to do some Chaos Marine, so I think that's going to be my next project is going to be some Black Legion. So I'm probably jumping right back into a bunch of trim work, and I'm kind of tired of trim already.
Yeah, it's all right. Black Legion don't have too much. You'll be fine. But okay, that's really cool. And these get drawn. When do these tickets get drawn? Is it at Nova?
It's at Nova. I believe it's September 1st or September 2nd. And, I really should know that date.
Here we go. Drawing to take place at Nova Open on the 1st of September at 4 p.m. And that's Eastern, isn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah. And the important thing is the winner need not be present.
Yes.
So there will be the winner will be notified, or the results will be posted on September the 4th. So you've still got a little bit of time after this comes out to jump in. I have to make sure this comes out on time this year.
And when you do get onto that site to take a look, not only take a look at Siege of Heaven, but take a look at some of the other offerings that are there. I was able to work on a Night Lord's. I'm drawing a blank. Zone Mortalis Force. I got to work on that with the famous Dave Taylor, which was a very fun project too. So we got to do Night Lords, but there are so many fantastic projects that are there that are offered from so many exciting artists out there. Just everything from single figures and vehicles to full armies. So it's definitely worth taking a look out there. Everything goes to charity, the Nova Open Foundation charity. Each individual project is given its own charity. The artist gets to choose. We chose the Fisher House, which is kind of close and near and dear to us. Working for the Department of Army and stuff like that. We see a lot of vets and wounded warriors and stuff like that. And so the Fisher House is a foundation that's set up for the families of soldiers that are injured, that allows the family to attend with the soldiers as they're undergoing their treatments or trying to get help. I try not to go too much into the military terms of it, that's our tendency, but try to keep it more in the standard English language. But that's what it's there for, is to support the families of a wounded warrior. So we're really pleased that we were able to choose that charity for our project. Some of the other projects do everything from Doctors Without Borders to cancer research. So many different charities that they work with, which is just fantastic. So yeah, definitely get there and take a look and try to support some of these projects, even if it's just a couple dollars here. The Warlord is only $8 per ticket, but like you said, there's a $10 minimum. So make sure that you buy a couple tickets for something else. Buy in on a single figure or onto one of the smaller units or something like that.
Or buy 2 tickets for the Warlord.
Or just buy 2 tickets for the Warlord.
You can always do that as well. So it's really good and hugely supportive. Nova is on the list of events I am definitely going to try and get to very soon. And I really like what they do and the way they run the con and everything else from the outside looking in. Right, so we've covered that. As I say, go and look at that. You've got some more news of some UK events though, or just more events in general. But.
So we just mentioned about the new artists. We just brought on Dev Sodagar, and he's a UK native. He's out of South London. I want to say Sutton. Look, it's hard to keep that. That was actually where we were staying for Warhammer Fest last year. When I left the model on the fence post, that was actually at his house. So, but yeah, he's in that area, and we just had Sam Lentz go out just a few months ago, and he taught at Darksphere, which is one of the larger hobby stores.
Yeah.
In the London area, and they were very pleased with how everything went, and Dev wanted to kind of carry on that, so he got to talking with them. And what we've done is we're going to develop through Dev a smaller section of course. So these are just 1 days. They're not the big 2-day super heavy events. They're going to be smaller 1-day events. They're going to be more designed on developing from the basics. One of them is army speed painting, which is going to be, taking a smaller squad and using both the airbrush and the regular brush to develop models in a quick manner. So during the day, you're going to learn a bunch of techniques to get through a squad. You should get pretty close to completing a full squad and possibly a vehicle in that day. And then, he'll expand on that and stuff like that. So we're excited about that one. And then he's got a couple others that he wants to do. One that's going to be based more in like an Age of Sigmar type painting style, so that you can get more organics done and stuff like that. And of course, they'll feature some of the new kind of hot techniques that are out there, using contrast through the airbrush and then using contrast with the brush in conjunction, stuff like that. So it's going to be very enjoyable. Good classes, going to be nice and smaller, which is maybe a little easier for people to do, where you're not committing an entire weekend to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're just committing a day to it.
Yeah, and you can drive into Darksphere as well and park there, so it's as well as getting the train in fairly easily. So it's pretty cool.
And that's the goal. And right now it's going to be just in the London area. But once Dev's kind of developed it and cut his teeth on it a little more, then we'll start looking at bringing it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe going into the south of England and pushing up into maybe Scotland, Ireland area, stuff like that.
Exciting times.
Oh, very, very so.
And you're still all over the place in America doing all your.
We are. We just got finished doing a semi-private event for the Adepticon staff party. We were able to go in and teach them, which is really fun with the Adepticon staff. Those guys are so busy at Adepticon, with running the show that they don't ever get to sit in and do any classes with any of the artists. So Hank decided, every year they hold a staff party, and they kind of, it's a reward for everybody that worked throughout the year on the Adepticon. And then also they have their annual meeting, which, builds up on what they're going to do for the next year and stuff like that. So it's a really enjoyable event. And we got invited to go over there and teach. So we did some really fun classes, just some very unique one-off classes. So we just got finished with that. The week before that, we were up in Victoria, Canada, teaching a class there. So I leave for Gen Con in about 4 days. So that'll be a week in Gen Con. And then once we finish up Gen Con, we get a little break for a couple weeks. And then we're doing another private event for the Beer and Bolter guys out there in Frederick, Maryland, which is really neat for Kat and I, because that is our first event that we ever taught, our first class we ever taught.
Awesome.
That was the original CK Studios 101. And we're sitting down thinking about that. And it's been 3 years now. And this is kind of the anniversary of the 3 years, because it was right before Nova that we taught this last class 3 years ago, our first class, so we're kind of going full circle with that and seeing, the growth and where we're at. We didn't expect to be anywhere near what we're doing. When we were looking at this 3 years ago, we were just teaching a couple classes, and we didn't even know if they would be successful or not,
Yeah.
So it's neat. It's exciting, and it's fun to be adapting to these things. So, we're excited. And then after that, it's full bore again. We're all over the place. We're in Phoenix. We're in Phoenix. We're in Atlanta. We're in Chicago. Sam is going to be up in Toronto. All over the place. Yeah. We're just starting we haven't put out the schedule yet for Vince yet, but we're starting to put together the venues for Vincent now. Sam's going to be starting a whole new line of classes. Vincent is going to be carrying on his class that he taught at UK, which were just incredible classes in themselves. So yeah, if we're not by you guys anytime soon, just wait, we will be. So
awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Is there anything else before we go?
No,
there's plenty. I mean, it is plenty. You're being busy enough.
Yeah.
It's you can't. There's only so many hours in the day, especially when you work full time as well.
Right.
So and it's a cracking team. I say I got to do the Vince one over here. It's fantastic. I've seen Sam a little bit on some videos and stuff, and the work he does is cracking. And then I've seen the rest of them. Yeah, it's really good. Really good stuff. So I would recommend them.
Definitely. The group of artists that we put together are they're so talented. I mean, I look at some of the stuff that Vincent does and some of the stuff that Sam does, and just like, wow. And then, even Justin with him just kind of cutting his teeth now, getting into the more high-end painting, just some of the stuff he pulls out, you're just like, wow, man, he's developing so quickly. He's learning so much so fast.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. And then I can't wait to see the results coming out of Dev's classes.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be super enjoyable.
Awesome stuff. Well, thanks for coming on and chatting about it.
All right, Greg.
And
hopefully we'll get to see you soon at one of these events.
Indeed, somewhere, somewhen. I'm quite jealous of you going to Gen Con, but I know you're going as a working, but I would like to go back one day. But who knows?
Well, we'll get you over there.
Well, yeah, we'll see. Awesome. Cheers, Caleb.
All right, thank you, Greg.
And you've made it to the end of another episode of The Imperial Truth. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully that was a entertaining episode for you all. Just to remind you, we will put in the show notes the links to the Nova Open raffles. so you can go and check them out. And in there, in those show notes, you can also find all the other links for the shows, whether you want to contact the show, greg@theimperialtruth.com, imperial_truth on Twitter, or you can follow me at Child of Fang on Twitter and Instagram as well at Child of Fang. We will try and keep those updated. I do my best, not always as common as I would like to. You can also use the email, so that's greg@theimperialtruth.com. I've been listening to a show called The Best General, which is a 40k podcast about a gentleman who decided to try his best to win a grand tournament, and it catalogues his journey on trying to improve. And there's some very interesting topics that came up in that show around sportsmanship and the way it's handled. 40k had developed, or 40k tournament gaming had developed a rap, fairly or unfairly, it developed that rap, particularly at some of the big events like ETC, where from the outside looking in, people thought there was an issue with trying to win, was trying to win in any way possible, was the be all and end all. I say whether that was true for the majority of people or not, there were elements it was true for. And they went about handling that situation. Now started me thinking actually about how we approach the game sportsmanship wise, and it's something I want to cover on a future episode. So if you've got any ideas, any relatable stories about how we interact on the table as a community, then please feel free to send me a message with those kind of experiences or stories or details written down, and I'm going to try and find some time somewhere to sit down and go through and work out how I want to get across my opinions, but also to see what other opinions that there are out there in the community already. In between recording and editing the show, the Adepticon hotel dates have been given out. So this is the date at which you can book in the Adepticon reserved block of rooms. A friend of mine did look up how much it would cost to book a room for the dates required outside of this agreed deal with Adepticon, and it's definitely worth waiting for that period of time for that hotel block to open up for Adepticon. And that is Friday, August 16th at noon Central Time. So not a bad time for the UK if you are considering going to Adepticon. Yes, you can stay off-site. There are shuttles, I think, that run between the hotels, and Ubering between hotels isn't particularly expensive. You can do that. It might save you some money. My personal way of doing things is the beds are big enough that you can sleep two in there easily enough. Put 4 people in a room, split those costs, stay on site means when you go down and book in, if you do get one of the more advanced, if you do get a very important gamer or I can't remember what they were called now, the advanced entries, then when you pick up your bag of swag, and mine was considerable, bearing in mind I wasn't a very important gamer, I had a lot of stuff, so yeah, you can take that straight up to your room at the end of the day. If you're playing in events and you've got a gap in the middle of the day, you can go up and sleep. Maybe you have someone there you can borrow a bed off, but I think with these events, if you can, staying on site is the much preferred option. Obviously, that has a cost to it and everything else as well. And the fact is, they sell out quite quick. So you want to be there on what was it, the 16th of noon. You want to be there straight away, getting those hotel rooms booked in if you want to stay on site. In fact, I just had a little quick look through the notes, and I think rooms last year were $129 a night ish, and that's for 2 beds, whereas non-event rate is like $399 a night. Although, as I said, you can stay down the road for $55 to $90 a night if you want to. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go this year. Next year, times might not add up, unfortunately. So I might be keeping an eye on the Nova Open this year. That might have to be. It's the one of the big 3 I haven't been to. I've been to LVO, done Adepticon 3 times now. And want to do Nova at some point. So next year I might be forced into doing Nova over the other two. Just wanted to shout that out for those who are interested in Adepticon. And then finally, I want to do a big shout out to the Patrons. I want to thank you for supporting the show. You too can support the show via Patreon if you head on over there. The link's in the show notes. And you can be a supporter of the show in that way. We're also always looking for reviews on iTunes and that jazz. And thank you to everyone who's left a review there as well. But we're wobbling on. It's a decent length show already. So I'm going to sign off. Until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.